when it comes to hard skills and soft skills, with the people that you're helping, how often would you say it's a hard skill deficiency? Mm-hmm. And how often would you say it's a soft skill or belief deficiency?
I always had that mindset that I'm going to have to do things, that much better and work that much harder to stand out because I didn't go to college. Mm-hmm. And then as I started working, I realized...
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I don't have a high school diploma.
Okay,
and I don't know if my employer knows that, but...
Nice. Okay.
We do now.
Company. Fire me right this second. Burnout happens, I feel like, when we're saying yes to too many things.
Nichole Harrop, thank you for joining me today. You are a podcaster, career coach, and the best customer success manager in all of Utah. Did I get that right?
100%. Couldn't
Awesome.
go wrong.
So tell me a little bit more about, you've managed hundreds of people over your career as a customer success manager, team leader, and everything else in between. Like, what's it like managing Utah's best?
Yeah. Well, thank you for your kind words. I've led teams, of all different sizes, all different types of people, inside the U.S., outside the U.S., remote, in person, and I just love leadership in general, and really the biggest piece of that is making an impact and helping other people learn faster and do their jobs better and find joy within what they're doing. So I knew from a very early age that I wanted to be in some sort of maybe education, and then later on realized that wasn't going to be in a school setting. I wasn't really interested in that route. I actually didn't go to college. And then when I started working in like the real world, so to say, in the corporate world, saw opportunities to step up and kind of be a leader amongst my peers before I became a leader within my actual title. So I've loved it. It's been a lot of fun, lots of ups and downs. Don't love, having to let people go and give tough feedback, but it's helped me grow along the way. And I love, it's what I do every day, is try to help people learn and grow.
Yeah, awesome. And there's something that you said in there that I didn't realize. In my preparation for this conversation, it must just be oversight on my part, but I didn't realize you didn't go to college.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then that's just so interesting, as someone who's done so much in their career, and especially, at the start of your career, didn't start off with college. Like, what was that like as you were, I'm sure, aspirational? If you made it to this point in your career, I'm sure you had aspirations early on too. Like, what was that like, not going to the traditional route?
Yeah.
And then going into the corporate world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, I grew up in, I guess, a space that I just knew that it wasn't going to be in the cards for me for going to college. And most of that was financially. And part of that as well was recognizing that I'm someone that likes to see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. And I couldn't see that going to college. I'm sure some of that was not having a ton of role models within my immediate sphere of people who went to college and understood that experience. But all I kept hearing is, I'm changing my major, I'm not applying my degree, or things like that. And so for me, I thought, I'm going to hit the ground running. I loved working. I've always loved working. I've worked several jobs overlapping each other for most of my life. And my husband thinks I'm a little, wild for doing that, but it's my passion. I love it. I'm very much like my dad, who's done the same. And so I started in the workforce. I worked as a server and did that for many years. But then when I moved into the corporate world, I knew that I was going to have to work harder. And I always had that mindset that I'm going to have to do things, that much better and work that much harder to stand out because I didn't go to college. Mm-hmm. And then as I started working, I realized, first of all, no one asked me about my degree to see if that was relevant. And I was a quick learner on the job. I'm very fast at picking up these different tasks, and I ask a lot of questions and figure out where I need to go. And so that has helped me kind of figure out processes that need improved, and learned very quickly and early on that was a skill set of mine, was that process improvement, and see right when people have the curse of knowledge because they've done something so many times, they forget what it's like being in the new person's shoe. So bringing that perspective in brought value to my leaders, and then they wanted me to help train other new hires. And so I very quickly started getting some of that respect, and level of being able to help my peers, because I went in with that mindset that I am going to have to work a little bit harder. And it's funny because after all these years and all the different jobs I've held, one of my most popular LinkedIn posts was when I was looking for a job a couple of years ago. I had posted, and someone had sent me the information to apply for a job, and then I immediately got rejected. But the hiring manager had seen, the buzz around that post of all of my friends, commenting, because I've worked really hard to build a strong network over the last couple of years here locally. And so they went and found my resume and found that I was auto-rejected because I didn't go to college, and then still wanted to interview me. So I posted on LinkedIn about that experience, and it was one of my most viral posts because people have so many thoughts on this whole, do you need to go to college or not in order to get a job?
Yeah, I think that's especially, I think it's a debate today, is college still worth it? And I think just about anybody could get a corporate or office job with or without a degree. Getting into management roles is maybe another discussion. You probably can't move from server to manager of a team immediately.
Right.
And not that one is better than the other, because both are necessary and needed jobs, but a corporate job is usually cushier. You're not on your feet all day, and
right.
So there's definitely some perks there. What was it like for you? Is it just the mentality that you brought of having to work harder than everybody else, or what do you think it was that helped you get promoted and start leading teams?
Part of that, definitely the mentality of it, and just overall grit and resilience. I feel like from my background as a young child and things I experienced growing up, kind of I had the choice, right? You either become a victim or choose to write your own story. And for me, I wanted a successful story. Part of it might have been out of spite of, my parents are saying, oh, you can't do this. And I said, oh, I will, watch me. So part of that was a big piece of my drive. And working towards that, knowing I wanted more and being open to paths of how to get there. So most of that was through relationship building. And why so much of what I teach in my leadership development programs is soft skill development. Of course, I think we can teach so much of the hard skills of, hey, click here, do that, use this, don't use that, go here. All of those step-by-step instructions, most things people can learn. Of course, it can take longer depending on how familiar or unfamiliar you are with it. Or if you've gone to college, there's some really great opportunities and ways that you are exposed to different things that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. So I think that there are definitely pros there as well. And for me, it was very early on recognizing that me building relationships with the people I work with side to side, as well as people that I report up to, kind of seeing, I'm very observant, watching how they are leading team meetings and thinking, how would I do it if I was in their role? Kind of sometimes practicing what would that sound like, asking for opportunities to step up and try new things to get my feet wet and then see where that led me. But building relationships was absolutely the most pivotal thing that I learned early on that helped me in all of my different roles throughout my career and getting promoted faster because of those relationships that I've built.
Yeah. And you mentioned hard skills and soft skills. As a career coach for how many years now?
I mean, I'd say most of my career I've done some sort of coaching.
If you are a relationship builder, you are doing some coaching, whether it's paid or not.
Right. More officially, probably within the last 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at least officially the past 5 years, you've worked with hundreds of clients and maybe thousands unofficially. By just talking with people throughout your career.
Sure.
When it comes to hard skills and soft skills, with the people that you're helping, how often would you say it's a hard skill deficiency? And how often would you say it's a soft skill or belief deficiency that's holding them back from the next job or the next promotion?
Yeah. I would say, as a guess, and easiest way to define it is almost always soft skills and confidence, especially a big part of who I coach is women. And I mean, the podcast I host is definitely geared towards women. And so much of that is confidence. And one of those mantras of the whole fake it till you make it is one of the ones I am particularly not as fond of, because for women, I feel like that brings in an extra added layer of I'm not being fully authentic to myself, and therefore I'm a fraud, and that doesn't feel in alignment with me. And so therefore I can't ever be in that role if I have to fake it till I make it into that. So the soft skill piece, so much of this, and I did a recent speaking event on networking, for example, and just talking about simple ways. I feel like I break it down so simply and really make it very elementary that it feels like I have to check in with some of my friends and say, is this like super basic? Because for me, I've been doing this most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And they are skills that take time and implementing. But for me, because I've done it so much, it seems very easy. And for other people, I have to touch base on this. Like, how does this feel for you? And they are very simple things, but need some of that repetition. So networking, I talk about using the thought of, again, relationship building instead of, putting your name on your chest with, a tag that says, hi, my name is Nichole, and I'm coming into this circle of probably mostly men and trying to see how I can fit in somehow and network. And if I change my mindset that I'm coming in here to build relationships, that changes my perspective. It makes me feel a little bit more at ease because I'm just trying to make some friends. And from there, I can be strategic and thoughtful of where I can go. So yeah, going back to what you said, absolutely. I think it's more of the soft skills and knowing how to build relationships internally with the company that you work for and who to kind of strategically be building those relationships with so that you can get more opportunities, I think will set you up so much faster than, of course, like there's going to be the stuff where you don't know how to do your job and you're like, hey, I've been here for 6 months and now I feel kind of dumb to ask for help. There's that, working through that and asking for help and being a little bit more vulnerable about a process. Hey, I'm not familiar with this. Can we walk through it once again? I'm feeling a little bit uncertain or not confident. Help me get the training that I need in your company. Will hopefully be willing to do that.
Yeah, that training aspect. And at some point there's sometimes a hard skill deficiency, but I also think for most jobs, it's a soft skill deficiency that stops people from, securing the job. Mm-hmm. And what you said kind of reminds me of something I've been repeating to people. I want to get your thoughts on it. You tell me if I'm totally wrong here.
Okay.
So I think for entry-level-ish jobs, people are hiring for like 75% personality, 25% skills. Okay. Mid-level, it's more like 50-50 skills and 50% personality. Higher level job, they're hiring you to solve a specific purpose. So I would assume 75% skills, 25% personality. Mm-hmm. And most job seekers are probably in the entry level and mid-level where it's either 50% or above of personality or soft skills. Mm-hmm. What's your take on that? Am I totally off base? Should I stop saying that to people?
No, Matt, I totally agree. And what you bring up is a good point, even in this kind of landscape that we're in terms of people looking for jobs. If so much of it, right, is on personality, but we're putting a paper that kind of explains who we are and what value we bring, mm-hmm. There's not a lot of personality you can add into a resume, which is so hard for people who have such great skill sets to be finding a job right now. And so I think that brings so much of that kind of in such an easy way, right? It's easy to say black and white with like, hey, it's because we want personality at these levels, and we're not seeing a lot of that until we get you into the interview process. But to get you into that, there's so many different steps that your resume may not make it past, which again goes back to that relationship building and putting yourself out there, beyond simply applying, and it's connecting again mm-hmm. with the people who work at those jobs, not just the recruiter, not just the hiring manager, but the people who are within those roles, because they are the ones that can help figure out, I just last week was asking, some connection of mine reached out and said, hey, do you know anyone at such and such company? And we are barely connected as acquaintances, but I was like, hey, bold ask, let me see, and I went and searched that company, found a connection there that I haven't connected with for probably over 10 years. messaged that person, asked, hey, do you have any advice for this person reaching out to me? They applied online, and he said, send me their resume and I will make sure it gets right in front of the hiring manager. So it's not a guarantee that they get an interview, but it's like one step closer of, hey, your interview or your resume is going to be seen by that person, and we hope that you can get to that next step of an interview.
Yeah, I think that's such a testament to, I don't know, I was probably similar to that kind of person as of a week or two ago, where, this is our first time meeting, and we have some mutual connections, but really I found you through LinkedIn, saw some of your posts, and I thought, wow, this is good stuff here. And then I saw your podcast. I'm like, oh, she's really had how many hundreds of episodes? Like, she's really bringing a lot of value, and she's connected with so many people. Like, I would love to talk to this person. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a testament to people who like talking to people, like helping people.
Yeah.
And if you do have someone in your network who knows a lot of people, it's worth an ask of, hey, do you know anyone at Qualtrics or Adobe or any of these other companies? And this isn't just a Utah-focused podcast. I think these principles apply anywhere, in whatever city that you live in.
Yeah. I
think you can reach out to somebody in your network, and they probably know somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings up a question, though, of you made sure that resume got seen, where in contrast, yours did not get seen immediately with the story you just gave. Mm-hmm. Are there any red flags on resumes that people should be avoiding?
Oh, I could go into many tangents on resumes. I think you're going to get advice. I was just at a conference that I spoke at last week, and the advice that was given, I was like, I don't buy into much of that.
Yeah.
If I was going to give any advice on a resume, it's to look at the job descriptions that you're interested in, and honestly ask AI to help you connect your current resume to the job description. Because oftentimes we are writing our resumes like a job description for ourselves and not adding our accomplishments and things that we're doing that complement the job description that we're applying for. Mm-hmm. So very archaic. I feel like the way resumes are done in general, I wish that people would honestly just maybe get rid of them total. I don't have other solutions at the time, but I don't love resumes. I think we see it all the time. People are hiring people they know, like, and trust. How do you build that if they don't know who you are? And that can be really intimidating, and I get it all the time. Nichole, I wish that I started connecting with people on LinkedIn sooner. I wish I was, doing the things that you're doing or had the connections that you have. And I said, I started somewhere, and I knew that I wanted to build a strong community here locally, and that's what I've built doing. But I know when people find a job, they have that safety net. So it's like, I have a job. I don't have to be on LinkedIn. I don't have to be commenting. I don't have to be connecting with people. It's kind of that relief. Mm-hmm. But I think after you get over that phase, it's holding yourself maybe accountable at some degree to say, hey, what can I do to build relationships? Because at some point, maybe I'm going to be the person who gets laid off. Maybe it's my spouse. Maybe it's my friend. I want to be able to help in those situations. And if that's the case, that you're a helper, you want to be able to help people, I say connecting with a minimum of 2 people a week in terms of reaching out through a sincere message on LinkedIn. You look at their profile, get curious, ask a question, an open-ended question to them. Mm-hmm. And if it goes somewhere, great. If it doesn't, that's okay. You made the effort. So that's my suggestion, is very small barriers. I'm kind of a all or nothing gal, and so sometimes when I go way too far in the DMs, I'm like, I'm gonna regret this later, because if any amount of people write back and I don't respond quickly, then I feel like I'm ghosting them to a degree. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. Am I going too deep on this? Am I doing too much background research on this person? So as far as LinkedIn goes, it seems like you're pretty active on it. You recommend people be pretty active on LinkedIn, 2 connections a week. I think that's totally doable for those viewing. And something that I've told people to do is, when you reach out, and you should be reaching out, you want to ask a question and package it with a compliment. And hopefully, like you said, open-ended question. Hopefully it goes somewhere. But if it doesn't, then you can still reach out to that person a few months down the road. You know, you're connected now. Their posts are going to be in your feed. You can comment on their posts 3 months from now. And if they interact with that, then you can reach out again and you can revive that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that's a good strategy? Do you have any other strategies for reviving maybe a dead conversation with someone you're trying to network with?
Yeah, so I host these lunches once a month, and it really is to bring people together from LinkedIn, and anyone could do it anywhere they're tuning in at. And I've had people reach out and say, how do I get something like this started? And again, I always say, just start and post about it on LinkedIn or wherever, because people start to have that FOMO of, oh man, I wish I would have gone. That would have been so cool to be chatting with these people, or, you know, making new friends. So I have one of the, I say like OG people who has come to these for probably well over a year, maybe more than that. I was asking him because he's not big to post on LinkedIn. And I think people get that confused. If I'm on LinkedIn, I like quote unquote should be posting. And I don't think that's the case. And for the most part, people who aren't posting and are, you know, messaging in the DMs are finding so much connection, and that's the biggest piece. Mm-hmm. So take away posting completely. Engaging in comments, I think, can be a great step to get seen and get some visibility. I'm big on being visible. So for me, that includes posting to my feed. But I had asked him, I said, what's your strategy in following up with people? Because you've been such a great relationship builder with people, and you know, hey, this person was here and they're looking for this, and this person's over here and I've connected them to so-and-so. How are you doing that? And he said something that I was like, wow, that was so simple. He goes to the bottom of his feed on messages. He'll just scroll back quite a bit and he'll decide like what that range is for him. So he'll be like, I'm going to scroll back 3 months, and anyone who hasn't responded to me, I'm going to follow up, and if it feels right, follow up and say, hey, was thinking about you, wanted to hear how your week's going, like have a great day or something like that. Just something that helps revive that conversation. And again, maybe they don't respond, but LinkedIn is not the greatest in terms of inbox management. Messages can easily get lost, and people kind of feel bad if they haven't responded after maybe a couple days or a week or something. And so it's just like, hey, would love to hear back from you on how things are going, or, you know, would love to hear how this is going, or invite them to something locally if you both live locally, for example. Again, very simple ways, but yes, very much to what you were saying in terms of reaching out, asking questions. Like when you reached out to me, it felt very natural, and it wasn't like, who is this guy like asking me questions about my experience or my podcast. It was a very easy flow, and I think people get nervous because there are so many sales pitches in the DMs.
Tons of them.
Like, I honestly was like, is Matt going to try to pitch me on like something podcasting or coaching somewhere?
Starting this new SaaS company for podcasters.
Hey, I'm always open to hearing, because I love referring people to opportunities. But I was like, I wonder where this is going. But it felt genuine and authentic. So that's what I say to people. If you were to type a message and that was the message you received, would that feel like an okay message to receive? Mm-hmm. If yes, hit send. You know, if you're saying, hey, would love to have you, you know, buy in on this thing, or like, I want to sell you this, like, of course, it's probably not going to be the most fun message to receive. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love being sold on stuff that is a right fit for me. So not turning that down, but figuring out, and that's what holds people back in terms of sending the message.
Yeah, I think, just real quick on that, I think a lot of us on LinkedIn are used to being sold. Even when I had like pretty small titles on my LinkedIn profile, I'd still get, you know, all these salespeople reaching out in the DMs that want to set a meeting. I'm like, I don't know what your product is. I don't know what it's supposed to solve. Yeah. And I'm not a decision maker on this problem. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if people reach out, you know, I was trying to talk to you as if we're already friends. Yeah. And I feel like if that's the approach you take, you know, like what you just said, if you receive this message, how would you feel? And then as you're typing that message, like just say it how you would say it as if you were already friends. Yeah. That doesn't mean you need to have some off-color jokes reserved for certain group chats, but that does mean that you can say, like, you know, have some spelling errors. That's okay. Like, then they know it wasn't written by AI. That's one of my biggest things right now is just like having spelling errors or grammar errors, just so people know I'm still writing my own stuff.
Well, real quick on that, I was messaging back and forth with this gal, and every response that came back to me felt like it was AI. And I genuinely, I was writing her saying, I'm so sorry if you are a real person, but these messages have so much, like, they're giving me AI vibes.
Like way too formal, way too structured.
Yes.
Like, what are you after here?
Yeah, again, I joke about being born and raised in, a call center. Like, I've been through all of the canned messages. I've written plenty myself where it felt like I was getting these auto-generated responses that were kind of mirroring what I was saying, but not quite getting us anywhere. And I finally had to, stop the conversation, and I felt bad, but I was like, it was just so weird. They kept trying to reassure me that they weren't, but it just didn't feel right. And so I was like, I'm going to have to back off. So again, with all the AI in the world, show up as you. There's the voice note feature as well. So sometimes I'll use that because I know when people kind of start growing their following, people wonder if it's truly them that's posting or engaging, and I want people to know that is genuinely, authentically me, and so I'll do a voice note in a response as well.
Yeah, that's smart. I haven't thought of that one, but I like that.
Yeah.
That is funny though. Like, is this AI? I have no idea, but now I don't trust you because you sound a little fake.
Exactly.
So I want to go a little bit deeper on your podcasting and then your coaching. I'm curious how you found your niche of who you're speaking to and what you're offering. So tell me a little bit about first let's hear why you started your podcast. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs and just curious people who like to try things, businesses are often they're often started from a place of maybe turmoil. Like, oh, my job is whatever it is right now. It's not great. And so I'm going to start this other business. Is that the case for you when you started your coaching and your podcasting? Is that you were trying to escape something else at work?
Not escaping, but more amplifying. Again, I come from a space that, for me, in my whole legacy, it's leaving an impact in this world. Who have I helped along the way? And the whole, the rising tide raises all boats kind of thing. That's the same for me, and I didn't always experience that. So I would say the turmoil part for me was when I was trying to get promoted into my first leadership role. I was told no more times than I could count, and I didn't have a mentor, really, a guide to help me in my path. I was so young in my career at the time. I honestly didn't even know officially what a mentor was, and in my early 20s, maybe college would have helped me with some of that, but I didn't quite know how to get to where I wanted to go, but I knew I wanted that, and I knew that it came not just because I was trying to climb a corporate ladder, but because I was genuinely trying to help more people. And I knew that having more of an influence in my title could help me do that as well. So a big piece of moving into kind of the coaching world and starting my podcast was actually, and it's fun to think back in terms of how things happened, because I got laid off at one job. I was hired by a company about, at this time back then, it was much easier to find a job, so take that with a grain of salt, but it was only a couple of weeks that I applied for one job, and he followed up with me. He said, I'm actually in the final stages with 2 candidates, but I like your resume, so hey, that worked for me.
Even without college on the resume.
Back then, yeah. When it was more of a job seeker market, and he didn't hire one of the 2 people that was in the final running, brought me on, and then from there, I ended up moving on for other reasons, and he referred me to this next job. So that whole kind of messy backstory, just to say that, you never know what your exact path is going to be. You kind of have to roll with what is happening. You get to choose how you respond in these different situations and scenarios. But I ended up working for this company where I was actually working with all men at the time. It was a very small organization. And when the CEO asked me, as he was thinking about growing his company, what I would want to do, I thought about that, and I was like, I've never been asked this question of what I want to do. I've always filled needs.
Mm-hmm.
I've always filled roles that were open. I've never thought of, I can create my own thing. And so after maybe a couple of moments thinking, I blurted out that I would want to help women grow in their careers. And he looked at me, obviously confused, because at the time we only had men working for us. And
like, what are you trying to say here?
Exactly. And so I thought that was so funny, but that is the thought that got me thinking of how do I help more women grow in their careers and avoid some of the things that I experienced along the way. And as part of going through some coaching of myself, I was challenged to go on some podcasts. But when I was searching through them, I found mostly podcasts that were hosted by much older white men sharing messages that I just didn't really quite align with, and felt like that's why a lot of women struggle with their own growth, is because advice out there is by some people who don't identify with and understand their struggles. And so when I came back and I thought I had done the assignment of, hey, none of these podcasts really vibe with me, so I guess I don't have to do this assignment, this coach I was working with was like, well, I guess you need to start your own podcast then. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, what did I just do to myself? So that was kind of the starting and beginning of why I created a podcast, just to have a message out there and a familiar experience that other women might have also gone through as well.
Mm-hmm. And if you were to kind of summarize the message of your podcast, because you said you want to have this message for women that they're not getting as much from other podcasts because it's not people who maybe share their story or background or beliefs. What would that summarized message be?
Well, and mind you, Matt, this was only 5 years ago, and even then, there have been so many more amazing podcasts that have come out that are female represented. So much more diversity, equity, and inclusion with that as well. So I love, and again, I'm always going to come from a place of abundance, that I love that there are so many options that when I get that negative review, I'm like, it's okay. I'm not for everyone, and I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
And so go find something that is. There's so many great podcasts out there that you're going to find something that you're going to vibe with. So to say that in 5 short years, there are so many more amazing podcasts that have come out since then. My message is to truly help women grow in their careers. It's to help create more female leaders, is what I start every episode out with. So that is my goal. The world needs more female leaders. It's in the background of pretty much every video I do in my office because it's just on a placard.
Well, I love that. So I guess that kind of reminds me of my wife and other women who have had jobs and maybe leave the workforce and return to the workforce. As you're thinking about coaching, women especially, sometimes to get a promotion, it takes long, thankless hours with the hope that the reward comes later. What would you say to a woman who is not sure of how long they're going to be in the workforce, but while they're in the workforce would like to still reach that promotion? Is it worth putting in those longer, thankless hours when you may leave the workforce and come back later? How can women navigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would change, anyone who came to me with that, I would change their mindset a little bit about that. Because again, I went into it with thinking the same thing of, hey, I don't have a college degree. I'm going to have to work longer, harder, faster, more efficient, whatever that was looking like. But again, since kind of putting all of my coaching into play and going through it myself, all these different experiences, so much can be done and you can grow so much faster when you are being, again, a little bit strategic, which again, some women don't like that word because it feels out of alignment. Like, oh, if I'm going into this, relationship, like this working relationship at work, with a strategy that feels out of alignment. But I think all of us, right, if we're looking to pursue a partner, if we're looking to pursue a job, whatever we're doing for passions, we're thinking like, what are my skill sets? What are things that I enjoy doing? What are things that I want to be doing? There's always strategy there. We're just calling it out more specifically. So I would say instead of working long, thankless hours, you're being very thoughtful about the things that we say yes to and being very communicative with our leaders about the things that we're working on, things that are going well, things that we would like to do maybe cross-departmentally. Because again, with women, sometimes we struggle to, give ourselves some kudos or to say, yeah, I did that and it was awesome. That kind of feels like this confidence that maybe we're not used to. But as we practice and get into that and own the great things that we're doing, it can help have more clarity with our leaders that I am ready for this. I have moved up the ladder. I have gotten hired like pretty much sight unseen from recommendations from other people. I've gotten hired for jobs without applying for the role. They didn't know I didn't have a college degree, so I was like, sorry. Hopefully that's not something that you're gonna try to say no now. But it's because of those things that I've been a little bit more strategic in how I've communicated the great things that I've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, on that note, I don't have a high school diploma.
Okay,
and I don't know if my employer knows that, but
nice. Okay,
they do now.
Good company.
if they're watching.
They're like, hey Matt, we need to talk.
No, it's I mean, I recommend finishing high school, but I think you can still get plenty of places without these traditional paths. Although almost everyone should finish high school, to be clear.
Got it.
Probably everyone. So that something you said there really stood out to me, and it's something that I've struggled with in my career too. But I think I probably see it more in my female colleagues, where we may have a tendency not to toot our own horn and not to communicate our accomplishments, and where we may just have more of a focus on being humble. The results will speak for themselves,
right.
But in my experience, if you don't communicate your successes, someone else will, and they get the credit because they communicated it, even if they had nothing to do with your project.
Yeah.
How can you, or what do you recommend to women who are in that situation of just, walking that tightrope of humility, but also communicating your accomplishments?
And I would say this goes for everyone. I kind of lean into this, masculine energy and a feminine energy, because there are many men that I've interacted with who kind of are in, and I don't want to say like a feminine energy in a bad way, but maybe isn't that like, puffed up, like I'm going to be so confident and just raise my hand at the second my boss asks me to do something. There are plenty of men out there who do not, align with that, who are feeling insecure or lack of confidence as well. So kind of lean into that. So if you are in that space, male, female, otherwise, is an exercise I found really helpful, not only for myself, but for clients I've worked with, is to write it out black and white in terms of what your job description is. So anytime I've been in the job market looking, I've always copied and pasted into a Google Doc, really simple, the job description, so that if I were to get hired in that role, I have it from the get-go. If not, you can always ask your leader for a copy of it.
Right.
But get the job description of what you were hired to do, and then add all the things, because we know that anytime we get hired onto a new job, it's all of a sudden these extra things start to creep up of like, oh, well, we actually do this on a weekly basis, and we actually do these things on a monthly basis, and here's what we do on a quarterly basis. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that wasn't quite outlined, but those are things that I do. So great, we're on the same page. I write all those things down. I write down different accomplishments. If I get a compliment from my leader, I'm writing those things down. And again, it's very simple. I keep a notes app on my phone, and I just track that for every month, anything that stands out in that regard. And again, comparing the job description to what I'm doing today, well, likely if you're at least like 6 months to a year in your role, you're going to look at that and think, wow, I'm actually a lot farther along than I thought. Or it can help you realize, oh, I'm not as far along as I would like to be. I need to ask for some help for some additional training so that I can get to this next point. So that's what I would say, is writing that out in the black and white. And I felt, again, for women especially, to see that written out can really help in terms of what are you doing in your day-to-day where you feel like, my boss doesn't quite understand that my plate is overflowing, and not in like a my cup runneth over, kind of vibe. It's more like I cannot literally take on one more task, but how do I communicate that to this, big vision, big picture leader who cannot understand the concept of what goes in to every big dream that they have and all the executionary tasks. So writing all of those things down. So again, it's something that I would do is maybe an exercise once a quarter, once every 6 months, just to kind of see if you're feeling a little bit low in your confidence, is looking at those things. It can help you recognize where you want to learn more about and how you can continue to grow, and things that you can say, wow, I'm really awesome at this and I've become an expert in these areas. And then it's a way of finding how to communicate that in your one-on-ones with your leader.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, I've talked about doing status reports to a degree of letting your boss above that know, like, hey, here are some things that I've been working on. Here are some things that are going really well. Here are things that I'm recognizing that I still need to be working on. Tell me what leader wouldn't want to hear that,
Mm-hmm.
right? The self-awareness to say, hey, here's some areas that I'm focusing on this week or this month because of X thing that's in my, KPI report or whatever that's showing where my stats are as an individual.
And the proactiveness too. Like,
Yes.
leaders love when employees are proactive about making
Absolutely.
changes or improvements.
I think the common misconception is that the only time I can talk about myself and say how great I am is in like a team meeting with some broader team. And that is not the case at all. There are so many ways that you can do that, again, one-on-one with your leader to say, hey, these are the things that I feel like are going really well. Do you agree with that? And then ask for them to find that proof, right? To say, oh yeah, I did notice that with this, that, and another thing. And then you can say, how do I communicate this, to our next leader above? Do you have any recommendations on, are you the one that does that for me? Do you think this status report, would be helpful? What's helpful to where it doesn't feel like I'm stepping over my direct leader, but I'm partnering with them, asking them, how do I make sure that my leader above you knows that I'm making good progress? What does that look like when you're reporting to them? So that way it can get them in the mindset. You're almost training them to say, hey, remember in your next one-on-one with this leader, like, we need to talk about the good things that team members are doing and how proactive I'm doing in communicating that with you.
Yeah, and I love what you said about keeping a journal almost of like the your accomplishments and the compliments that you've received. It's not something I've been doing, but it is something that, I remember these moments of positive feedback. And it would probably be a little bit nicer if I wrote that down, and in moments where I feel like I am not qualified for my job. I got a new job like 8 months ago.
Okay.
And there's still moments like,
Absolutely.
definitely every week, maybe every day, where I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, why did they hire me?
Yeah.
And I think that probably happens, you could speak to this a little more than I can, but it probably happens at every level of leadership.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think having that catalog of wins, especially verifiable from other people, it just speaks to your competence and that you can, in fact, do things. So I love that. I think that's awesome.
Well, and when you go to do, let's say, like a quarterly review or a 6-month review or annual reviews, I'm in that space where, again, I coach to this daily and I talk about it all the time. But there have been times too where I pull up that report and it's saying, what have you done well this year? And I'm like, nothing.
I haven't done anything.
Yeah. Fire me right this second because nothing's coming to mind, because it feels like you're put on the spot and you're instantly being judged. I can't imagine like all the feelings that people go through when they read those, like when they just open that document up that talks about like, tell me about the great things that you've done this year. And so when you are keeping kind of a report of the different things, even if you're working on a project that ends up, funding is pulled and so you don't get to finish that project, what was your piece in that? How did you help something progress? How did you, I'll track down referrals I made. Some of my team right now are out in Thailand in their circle of excellence, and I referred the planner who planned that whole, event for them. And obviously I'm hoping it goes really well. Otherwise I will change my mind on that referral. But you know what I mean? If it does go well, I can tie my name to say hey, because of my network and because of my awareness and my connections internally, because I built a relationship with the assistant who was going to plan it. And I said, hey, would you, be open to some options of people who could help plan this event for you? Got them connected, and that flourished, and made her life so much easier. So again, I know all of those different things, and I have a reminder on my calendar monthly of quick reflections. And I think back to those different things that are happening so that I can note them for those exact reasons, that if my leader comes up to me and says, what have you done this past quarter, to make an impact beyond your day-to-day role, instead of freezing, I'd be like, let me go look at this document and I can, tell you some things that I've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's awesome. One of my things that's been said to me quite a bit lately, as I'm a product manager at a small tech company.
Nice.
And so bottlenecks can be everywhere. But my boss is great at reminding me, like, hey, as long as we're not the bottleneck, like, nothing is going, no negative outcome here is going to impact quarterly reviews, performance reviews, anything like that with me.
Mm-hmm.
My VP is not going to be upset with me because everybody knows Matt got his part done on time. It's waiting in design or development or whatever. And for everyone at work, I know I'm not perfect on that, but that's the idea. If we can work towards like, well, as long as I do everything that I can to not be the bottleneck in the process, even if funding gets pulled, even if something else falls apart, we can still communicate to our managers, our higher ups, that we were successful in our inputs, even if the output fell apart for whatever reason. And on that note, I think most people are individual contributors at their job. What changes need to take place in someone to go from individual contributor to then manager? And that I'm not asking leader because everyone can be a leader, but individual contributor to manager.
Yeah, well, in that example that you were just using, Matt, in terms of like, hey, I'm not the bottleneck, I would say if I was coaching someone, what are the next steps beyond that? And what are we doing in the interim? So that's what I would be documenting in like a status report or talking in my one-on-one with my leader, is saying, hey, I've done all of these things, like agreement that there's nothing else I can do. Okay, great. What else beyond that can I do as well? Or what can I make, again, I'm always saying, whose life can I make easier? And so much of that in companies is building relationships to figure out who needs connecting even internally, because not everyone always knows who to go to for that next thing. So I work at a company that has, maybe a little less than 500 people right now, and we're globally. And so I try to build relationships internally and again, chipping away slowly at that. But in building these relationships, I'm able to say, oh, that thing you're working on, I also heard so-and-so in this other department has been making some progress. Like, have you two connected on that? And like, synced up in terms of like dual efforts or whatever's going on there. And they're like, I had no idea this other department was doing some of that. Like, let me reach out to them kind of thing. So that's kind of where I feel like you're stepping into the persona of individual contributor to people leader. And I don't necessarily recommend that to people unless they've been in their role about like a minimum of 6 months and that you're feeling really confident and comfortable in your role. Because there are people, right, that come into that job interview and we all think that every leader wants to hear that, like, we all want to promote into leadership roles. So we're asking like, hey, when can I take your job or when can I get promoted? And we're like, whoa. Like, come in, do the job, and there will be opportunities. It's great to ask, like, where does this role lead? If things go really well, let's say, after 6 months to a year, maybe 2 years, what does that path look like, right? So that's what I would say is kind of standing out as a people leader amongst your peers, amongst like cross-departmentally. So building those relationships, not only within your direct organization, but who are the people, right, in product management. Like, who are these other people that you might be interacting with that you don't work with in a day-to-day, and building relationships there? Because again, you want buy-in from these different people so that when your name is brought up in terms of promoting into a leadership or people leader type of role, that it's not your leader alone that is saying, Matt's really great, we should promote him. Then so-and-so in this other department, because you've built that relationship with their team and things that you're doing to, help bridge those gaps and offering help or support or whatever that is, that might not be any extra work for you other than offering that help or connecting people. That is where people are going to say, oh yeah, like, I've heard such great things about that person. Let's talk, like, tell me more about them. You don't want your direct leader to be the only person in that room that's, fighting for you to get that promotion. So that's what I would say beyond that is the expanding your internal network and checking in with the leaders of those different teams, which again can be very intimidating to ask for time. We think, oh, I can't take any of their time. They're probably so busy. But again, it's treating it as, hey, here, I'd love to chat with you to learn a little bit more about your role and your history here, how you got here. People love to talk about themselves and share their story. So if you ask that and then say, and I'd love to share a couple things that I'm working on and get your advice. People, again, love sharing some advice.
People get plenty of advice without even being asked.
Right.
If you ask, they'll definitely give you some advice.
Exactly. Might not always be what we want to hear or the direction. So, right, there's that filtering that we might have to go through. But when you're asking, hey, here are some projects that I'm working on. Here's a piece. And again, it's that self-awareness is such a huge piece of this. But being able to say, I want to talk to this leader of this department. And what is something, and you could certainly use AI to say, hey, here's all the things I'm working on. For this job title, what things should I prioritize my efforts and talking to this leader about? And then it might, spit out some options for you. And then you can say, okay, I'm going to talk to them about this specific project that I worked on. Maybe it's already completed, but you're like, hey, I just completed this project or this thing that I was working on. Here's a place where I kind of got to this fork in the road and I wasn't quite sure. I ended up going this route, but what would your thought process have been?
Mm-hmm.
So it's understanding people's minds, because that is what is, I think, going to help so many people beyond that, is to understand why they did what they did, so that you can see in the future, oh, I understand why they chose to go this route on this product because of how they broke down how I could have gone about my project differently.
So, as always, it comes back to people, right?
Always comes back to people.
Yeah, that's the tough part. I think a lot of us, we put these labels on ourselves like, oh, I'm, what am I trying to say here? The introverted. Yeah. Mm. I think a lot of us will say, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert, which I don't buy into.
Yeah.
I think you go through periods, which could be days or hours or years of introversion and extroversion, or maybe seconds of introversion and extroversion. And I think that's a much more accurate description of myself, at least. And so it is difficult sometimes to want to reach out to people. And I have seen individual contributors who are maybe highly skilled at their job, but maybe didn't put in the investment into the people aspect. Maybe aren't as great at managing people or investing in people, and who maybe it was not the right time for them to become a leader. And so I think it's okay to recognize that in yourself as well, and do a little self-audit, a little self-reflection, and say, if I want to be there, and if I want to be there and be great at it as the next manager, VP, or whatever level you want to get to, I think it does take a little bit of self-reflection too, to realize I have or have not put in the time to be good at managing relationships, which I feel like you probably agree here, but I feel like it's a missed point. You hear that people don't leave bad jobs, leave bad managers. Absolutely. Which has been true for almost all of the times when I've left a job. Sometimes it's just better opportunity, right. But a lot of the time it's also like, I just did not love their management style. Even if you didn't leave on terrible terms, sometimes it's just didn't jive with the manager. Yeah. Or maybe no one did. And I think that happens too.
And I would add to that, it's having that self-reflection like you were referencing and thinking, why do I want to move into this role? I feel like there are so many leaders out there, or people in leadership roles, I should clarify, that we all understand are probably not there for the right reasons. And I think the biggest mistake that organizations make are promoting their highest performers.
Yeah, definitely.
Because, right? Simply because you're great at your job does not equate to a great people leader.
Yeah.
And while I was always pretty high up in my stats, I wasn't always number one, nor did I care to be. I wasn't always like this salesperson. That was not my desire. I was always in like customer care roles because, again, that relationship piece, solving problems, was where I really enjoyed being instead of selling things. And I recognized that several of the leaders in those organizations were promoted because they were the highest performer. And so they thought we could take highest performer, move them into people leadership, And then all of a sudden they're going to be these great people leaders. And time again, I say that is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I get that it's like we don't want to reward behavior that maybe isn't the best.
Right.
But if we can communicate, again, in an organizational culture to say, hey, we are taking into account more than just your numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Your numbers are a piece of things because, of course, that's how you keep your job and do well if those are properly defined goals. But there's also the aspect out here of what are they doing to help people? And I've heard a recent experience about this scout that was scouting some people for a sport, and they said, I knew that they were a great player. What I cared about was what they were doing on the sidelines when they weren't playing. Were they only focusing on themselves? Were they hyping up their other team members?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And especially as they were leaving, how were they treating their family when they left? And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, this feels so real that I've not thought of it in that way ever. But man, is that so accurate in terms of people leadership? Who is staying behind, when you have a big organizational get together and they're kind of picking up some stuff off the floor because other people left a mess? Yeah, we have cleaners who are coming in to do that, but could I do a little bit of my part to make their life easier? Those are kind of the traits that I'm looking for in people leaders, and oftentimes what is so often missed and become those leaders that we quit.
Yeah, I think bringing it back to the sports analogy, recruiter, scout thing.
Yeah.
I also heard something similar where like someone could be the best quarterback, wide receiver, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if they are the kind of person who then on the weekends or every night goes out and parties and brings their teammates with them,
mm-hmm.
and they're out till 2 a.m. and they're using substances or getting drunk or whatever,
mm-hmm.
they can't show up to practice the next day and be the best quarterback, wide receiver, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so if you're not someone who is lifting other players up or teammates,
mm-hmm.
even if your numbers are the best, then you're not going to be the one who seals the deal. You're not going to be the one who gets the job.
Mm-hmm.
So switching gears just a little bit, thinking more from the employer side
mm-hmm.
now. New employees are often thought of as a risk
mm-hmm.
because even if the resume looks great, even if they are a great people pleaser, they're charismatic in the interview, it's still a risk. You don't know how this employee is going to be once they get the job.
Mm-hmm.
What can candidates do to de-risk themselves in the eyes of an employer?
I like that question. Candidate to de-risk themselves, it goes back to showing your value as often as you can and having an understanding of what that's looking like. I'll use an example. When I started my job just over a year ago, this current role that I'm in, there was not a lot of training materials really whatsoever, and I felt kind of thrown into this pool, and it was kind of like just swim around and see what you can find and
just figure it out.
Kind of teach yourself. And I'm honestly surprised at how many organizations go about things this way. I've seen a job description of a company I really respect, but I really dislike their job. Like, it's a line in their job description that basically says, if you can't train yourself in this role, don't apply, basically.
What a waste.
I may be misquoting it.
Yeah, but
right?
close enough.
But again, and verbiage and so much of it comes back to, like, if you're looking to attract a diverse candidate pool, that one statement right there, I was like, as a female, I would self-deselect and say, this is not for me. If I can't ask for help and feel like I'm going to be supported in my space, that I tell my leaders, I hate being a new person. I hate when I don't know the things. I like to teach people things. So when I'm in the space of not knowing, it is so uncomfortable for me because I feel really vulnerable, because then what, right? I could be let go at any point. So if I'm a new candidate starting a role similar to the one I started, where there wasn't a lot of training material, maybe it's a startup environment, for example, and things are changing, and like every day is like you work for a different type of organization because of how fast things change. Like, I've been there, I've loved it. So it's recognizing with your leader what those expectations are. When reading through, kind of like common expectations of roles to be successful, it seems, again, so simple, but it's, what do you expect of me this week to consider it a success? That's what I would say as a new hire, especially if it's not written out and things feel chaotic and I feel like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? That's what I would ask my leader. And if they aren't sure, I would ask them to get it from their leader. And I would keep moving up that chain until I got a very clear expectation. Hey, this week we want you to go through these 5 things and we want you to feel really comfortable in, being able to utilize them in a role play or whatever, for example. Like, we want you to feel comfortable. I would get definitions because we want you to feel confident in this thing. Well, what is confidence?
Yeah, you should know HubSpot by the end of the week.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Do I know what HubSpot is or what it does? Or like, do I know every single thing?
Yeah. Do I need to know
that?
all functionality? Do
Exactly.
I need to just know how to create emails or update customer bios? Like,
exactly.
What are you asking for?
So it's just like, and I think Brene Brown was one of the books that I read of hers where it's kind of like this idea of painting a picture, because if I asked you to paint a picture of a house and I painted a picture of a house myself, I'm guessing they probably aren't going to look the same.
Yeah.
Like, mine would for sure have a real basic tree next to it, you know what I mean? Like, real simple, cute little like block house, but there would be differences about that. So, but we both drew a picture of a house. But how do we get more clarity between that and really understand? Because there's so many meetings I'm sure that people are in where they end up leaving the meeting because they're nodding their head saying, yes, I understand, yes, I understand. And then we get off the meeting and I'm like, did I really understand that? Now that I'm thinking about it, in the moment I thought I did, but now I don't. It's those moments to say, hey, can we go over this one more time? Can I tell you what I think you asked? And it feels so simple and you honestly feel kind of dumb doing it. But until you get those repetitive moments, you might feel like you're still a risk. And if you just coast and not ask questions and nod my head thinking I'm okay, me as a leader is thinking, I don't know if they're getting it. And they're not advocating for themselves. So it's not necessarily, part of my job as a leader is to try to like anticipate needs, but I need my people to be also telling me what they need and where they're feeling lost.
Yeah.
So I always set that expectation when someone's new. Whenever you're feeling lost or confused, at any moment, it doesn't matter. Ask me. I am sure there are things that I haven't thought about or things that have changed, and it's my job to fix that. It's not your job to try to guess where to go. So I think that was one of the biggest things that I learned in leadership was when I started taking ownership instead of saying, I can't believe they didn't know how to do that thing. I'd go look and I'd say, oh my gosh, I can't believe we never trained on this. That's our fault, not their fault. And so many organizations put it on the person instead of on the organization.
If you're going to take the approach of ultimate accountability or extreme ownership, as Jocko would say, I've done both, where I haven't asked questions and then it goes on so long where it's like, I really should have known this by now. And then you feel way more embarrassed asking about a certain thing. And then on the flip side, I ask questions and look like an idiot all the time. And I feel like these days that's a superpower where everyone wants to look smart, but less people are willing to look like an idiot.
Yeah.
And you might feel like an idiot, but no one, especially if you're new, like you got to ask so many questions because then the longer you've been there, the less you feel like you can.
Yeah.
So especially early on, I think it's so important to ask questions and don't let yourself get to a point where it's like, oh, I should have asked about that. I should have clarified these expectations months ago. Because then you might be in a position where you're not meeting expectations, where it is kind of on you at this point now.
Yeah.
Where, sure, they didn't tell you, but you also didn't ask for 4 months. So you create your own problems.
Yes, agreed. One thing that if anyone's like me as, a high achiever, I like to be good at things. I work hard to get there. I'm not just expecting it from the get. When I heard the phrase that I don't know what I don't know, that alone was like, wow, what a relief. Like, sigh of relief. I don't know what I don't know. So when I'm in training, I don't know what I don't know yet. You could be going through this whole thing in a section of training, and I'm looking at you and I'm like following what you're doing, but it's not comprehending because I don't know what I don't know. So once you get to a phase, and I use that all the time of saying, you know what, I don't know what questions to ask because I don't fully understand this yet. And I always use like the power of yet instead of I don't know this.
Yeah,
and it's
I'm
like
big on
a
that.
finality, right? And then once you do know, because, right, it's once we get to that point, and then we're almost embarrassed to ask the question because we know now, we know what we don't know. But that is what leads us to asking the question. Hey, I know that we've talked about this thing, and here's the question that's going to help me bridge the gap of the things I didn't know last week or last month or whatever it is when we last discussed about this thing. Help me to understand. Am I understanding this correctly? Help me fill the gaps. Like, there's so many different ways we can go about it that doesn't feel like we're just simply saying, you know, help me, teach me all from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you said there. Like, well, I don't know yet. You know, once you recognize you have a deficit in something. Mm-hmm. I'm very big on, like, not making statements of, I am this.
Yeah.
I am this right now. Mm-hmm. I am bad at Excel right now.
Yes.
I can take this course. I can do my job in Excel, and I can get better at that. Like, all skills are learnable. I really believe that. And so I don't want to assign these limiting beliefs that we then live by. Yeah. Like, I am this person. Like, no, that's how you are right now. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that people can change and we can grow, and we should.
Yes.
So moving back a little bit, we're just talking about what's new in your job. Mm-hmm. Moving back to a job seeker when you're in the job market, is it necessary to be a micro influencer on LinkedIn just to get noticed as a job seeker?
I love it. I love the question. Not necessarily. I think
so that's not no.
I
just
think
not
it
necessary.
Can help. Yeah. I think if you're going through the traditional route currently of let me apply to jobs and hope that I get a job interview, I think you might be looking for a job for a long time.
Yeah.
If you know people who can, you know, bring your name up to their organization, that's helpful. That's networking. That's that relationship building piece. So I think you have to heighten what you're doing, but with awareness. Like when I was looking for a job and realized, hey, you know, as I'm building my coaching business, I still really enjoyed working. So finding that balance for me was having a job and then looking for that and figuring out where I was going to land next. I was very grateful to have my network. I don't think you need it, but again, looking on LinkedIn for the roles that you want to have and connecting with people in those, the individual contributors, asking questions. Is this even a company I would want to work for?
Yeah. Do you like your job?
Yeah.
What's the culture there?
I say don't ask people within 6 months just getting hired because they are kind of in a honeymoon phase, 6 months close to a year. But once you're like 8 months and beyond, I think that's a very good idea or awareness of what that company offers. Do you feel like there's opportunities for growth? What does this look like? And again, I think that can help you get to where you're looking to go. Mm-hmm. But if you're not like a micro influencer, for example, on LinkedIn, it's maybe showing up to events. We live in a great place where there are so many events that you could be busy almost every night going and networking and building relationships right in person. So even that aspect of getting out there, letting people get to know you, and again, the people we know, like, and trust, we're getting to know them, they like you, the trust is going to start to grow. But if they can see that you have, you know, X amount of years in product management, the trust right there in saying they have experience, now we have this role, great fit, like I would love to introduce you, like that is how you can shorten that search. It doesn't have to be posting only. But again, visibility, no matter how you're doing it, is how you, I think, can get there much faster.
Yeah, I'm all for things that reduce... Let me take a step back. Mm-hmm. I'm all for things that don't reduce your options in the future. So when someone is asking me, what do you think? I'm thinking about joining the military. Mm-hmm. And people need to be in the military, and, you know, that's another discussion there. But like, well, for 4 years, you will have your options limited to just your job in the military. And is that something that you want? Is this career path what you want for the next 4 years? And for those who maybe are a little more wishy-washy and job hop, like, well, that's probably not the right path for you if you like trying new things every 6 months.
Yes.
So that's just one example. So I like not removing options, and then I like increasing the odds of success. And so you should probably finish high school. You should probably go to college. It's not for everyone, but it does increase the odds of getting a job. And posting on LinkedIn, creating more relationships with people, it does increase the odds that recruiters will find you. And you have this catalog of like, oh, here's what my team just accomplished at work. And then picture of your team.
Yeah.
We improved whatever by 30% metric, and you can put your success. Like LinkedIn kind of becomes this catalog of an expanded resume.
Right.
And so when recruiters see that, or prospective hiring managers, that's more of a testament where you have created this online advocate for yourself, where I think it's really valuable, especially for job seekers. Like you said, if you're going the traditional route, cold resumes, no connection, you'll probably be looking for a while. So if you want a job quick, maybe do a little more.
Yeah.
But if you're okay with looking for a long time, then do your thing. Go a little slower.
Yeah.
So on the topic of getting a new job, more qualified job seekers get to be a little more choosy with what job offers they accept. And for them, how do they get a feel for culture without actually working at a company?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a big thing is the piece on LinkedIn of connecting with people that you're interviewing with. So for example, if I was interviewing for an organization and things were actually progressing, then I would go and try to connect with several people in that same job title. And that way, hopefully, maybe one or two connect with me. And I did that same thing with the current organization that I work at now, because it was really important because of the fact that I am growing a personal brand. Not every organization is down for that.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to waste my time. I didn't want to waste their time. I didn't want to make things awkward, because I did have a company I worked for at one point that was not cool with me posting on LinkedIn pretty much at all. And so it felt really weird, and I became disengaged in that role and was looking for other work, because that didn't feel in alignment for me. And it's not good for either of us to have to go through that. So I would definitely be connecting with people to see if I can get an understanding. I am shocked at how much people are willing to open up to me. Some of my introductions of building a relationship with someone is, hey, I see that you've been at X organization for X amount of time. How are things going? So many people respond, honestly, not very happy. I'm looking for other roles right now. They go into some stories for me, and I'm like, wow.
They're dropping names.
Yeah. I'm like, wow, what if I was undercover and I was feeding this back to your boss? That would be so bad.
Yeah.
But people are willing to open up about their experiences. So that's when I would say, hey, I'm currently, in the very early stages of interviewing, and I would honestly love to hear a genuine response on how you like working there. People do that to me for my day job often, and I give them the truth of all the great things, some things I think that could be improved. So asking those questions, hey, what are you excited about? What do you feel like could be improved? Where would you, do you see if I'm a female and I see that there's not a lot of women who work there, hey, what do you feel about this in terms of the lack of women represented at your organization? Questions like that. And I'll say, don't feel like you have to respond to all of these. Feel free to respond to whatever, you have time for, and give them that out and say something like, hey, and if you don't have time for this at all, I appreciate, even you taking a look at this, all the best. So that way, again, it's always a good vibe that if I did get hired there, and they didn't, see that in time or something, that it wouldn't be an awkward conversation or I was rude about them not responding, for example.
Yeah.
That's just one example of what I would say to someone who's, looking to make sure it's a right fit on both sides, and finding time to ask some questions in return. And if you don't have those in the moment, again, I think AI is great in ways to help us think about questions. I'll put a job description inside of AI and say, what questions. I'm in the final stages. I'm going to be interviewing with this person.
Mm-hmm.
I'll even feed put their LinkedIn profile if I have it. Say, this is who I'm meeting with. I want to ask questions that are relevant to that person's role, because we shouldn't be asking like a senior VP of an organization like what PTO looks like, or some basic questions that, sure, if you need answered, great, but like let's ask them to maybe the recruiter or someone else. But I'll ask, like, what questions could I ask to make sure I'm a right fit? Here are some of my thoughts of wanting to make sure it's a good fit for me. And that's kind of what I would feed into there. And if you don't have time for those questions in your interview, you run short, I would ask for follow-up. Hey, I do have some questions that I would love to have answered to make sure I'm also a right fit for this role, as much as, you're trying to make sure I'm a right fit as well. What's the best way to get some time to do that? Would you like that in an email? Would you like to schedule some additional time? How can we make sure that I get these questions answered? And they might be like, well, actually, I have an extra 15 minutes. Do you feel like that's sufficient enough? Great, let's do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, the reason I ask is I'm not saying like I'm one of the most qualified candidates, but when I did get my new job 8 months ago, I had 2 offers with same title, same pay. One of them had an hour commute, and I interviewed in person for that one, and I took the day off work to go do that.
Yeah.
And the culture in the office was a little stuffy. People I interviewed with were great. No bad comments there. But just the culture that I could kind of feel looking around, it just felt a little stuffy.
Yeah.
And on the way out, I asked about like the dress code. So they're like, oh yeah, like what's... I think that's a bit of a sign about culture. Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, on Fridays you don't have to wear a tie. I'm like,
oh, wow.
What? Okay. I don't have to wear a tie. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I was like, okay. And on the drive home, it was an hour long, so they had time to think about it, talk about it. I got the call from the recruiter, got the offer, and I said, oh, I'm going to take some time and think about it. But I was excited, but also a little bummed.
Yeah.
Because like if I take this, I have to have an hour-long commute, and I have to wear a tie every day except for Friday. Like, is that really what I want? And it was more money than I was currently making. Yeah. So I felt obligated to take it if I didn't get, this other job that I was interviewing for at the same time.
Yeah.
And it came down to culture and the drive. That's a long drive for me.
Absolutely.
But, the numbers and the title, everything was about the same. But the culture was so different between my company where I'm at right now and the company that I interviewed at. And really the bonus structure was way better over there. And so I probably would have made more money.
Yeah. It's not all about pay.
Yeah. And back to the leadership, discussion earlier, like if the only reason you're looking for a promotion is money, then you probably need to do a little bit more reflecting there. But lastly, I just want to ask you, a recent guest, he said, people don't get burnout when they're winning. What do you have to say about that?
That's a really good thought. Burnout happens, I feel like, when we're saying yes to too many things. So I feel like in that same sense of, and I feel like it can go into different facets because, for example, and this is probably where people either like really like me or dislike me because I'm just not a one size fits all approach. Yeah. So you'll often hear me saying like, well, it could go this way, but here's this, and it depends on the individual situation. So an example, I worked at a startup and I loved that environment. I didn't even know what a startup was. I got recruited and I was like telling my boss at the time, like, this like startup is at like wanting to interview me. Like, is that a good thing? And he was like, you got to go interview at least. He was such a huge
go
supporter.
See what it is.
Yeah, such a great advocate, which you didn't always find at that organization. But when I started there, I felt like on top of the world when I had a lot going on. I started there as a team leader, so I got a lateral, move with like a $5,000 bonus at the time. People thought, like, they told me, you're crazy for taking this role at the company I was leaving because you don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah,
that
you're
is
leaving
such
stability.
A huge risk. Yes, I'm leaving stability. Like, it was one of the roles where you basically had to like wait until someone like, passed away or retired kind of thing.
Right,
like there just wasn't a lot of big growth because it was at a very stable company, right? Very established. Well, at this startup, I was like, well, I'm taking a risk, yes, but I felt like there was more upside. And I was in a space and time where I could put a lot of energy and time into that role. And so I joined the company. I was working as a team leader, then quickly within 5 months got promoted to a manager role. They gave me a huge raise, which was awesome.
Congrats.
Thank you. Then I took over the training department as well, because we all kind of raised our hands in helping different areas. And I was like, sure, I'll help with training. Didn't realize I was taking on like essentially a whole nother role, and not just, hey, every once in a while. It was like every single month we had new training cohorts coming through.
Yeah.
And my team we were called like Nick at Night, because me and my bosses, we both had Nick in our name. And so we ran the night team that, closed shop at 8. But then I also ran training that started at 8. And so some days I was there from 8 to 8, and other times I had other people helping me out, whatever. So that didn't feel like burnout to me, because I loved what I was doing. And so maybe with that guessing, like when you're winning, it doesn't feel like you're ever going to have like that burnout.
Mm-hmm.
So I can definitely understand that. And on the other side, it's knowing what to say yes to, which again is that whole idea of like, if I'm doing a lot of what I really like, how could I possibly be in that burnout phase? Again, with being thoughtful about the amount of time you're working and what that energy is. But there are things that are draining to us and things that are really exciting and really fill us up.
Yeah, sure.
So figuring out, and that can be hard in an individual contributor role when everyone kind of has the same job description and you're like, but I really like doing this. They really like doing this. So like, how can we have some like cross-pollination within individuals so that they can do more of what they really like? That might be the more heads down, like notes and documentation and email stuff. And I really like the like face-to-face stuff of like the customer meetings. Like, how can I do more of that? And then they do more of this. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of figuring out what that is. But that's where I would say more often the burnout comes from us saying yes to too many things and not knowing how to appropriately say no, because we don't want to be seen as like we're lazy or we're not being like a team player.
Yeah. So do you feel like the most common cause of burnout then is just taking on too much?
Yeah, taking on too much, and probably things like if you're not a right fit for the things that you're doing, you're probably not going to like what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. Like for me, I could never work. I grew up in Cache Valley in an area that has a lot of like factories. So for example, my grandma worked at like a chocolate factory, and her job was like one space that she stood out all day, and like it was just to make sure that like this particular chocolate came out in like its right shape and had like the cover the little crinkle thing around it properly. Like that was her job. Yeah. And she loved it. And for me, I would never survive there. Yeah. If I was doing that one thing like over and over again, I need change, and I can have some repetition, but I need also change in my day-to-day, or I will feel like probably like I want to pull my hair out. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Well, cool. Nichole, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
How can people reach you if they want to get connected?
Are you going to be surprised if I say find me on LinkedIn? The best way to reach me is LinkedIn.
Awesome. Okay. Nichole Harrop, everybody.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you.
You did great. I feel like I don't know how you do it with